Okay, guys, here we go with the notes. Today we're talking about political ideology and propaganda. We got a little bit to get through, so let's make sure we can write everything down and understand what we're talking about here. We'll start off with the political ideology. Political ideology is how people feel about political topics, and there's a wide range of it. Generally, what we're going to talk about in the part of this is the three main areas in the political spectrum. Political spectrum is a range of beliefs or ideas, and I'm going to show you a full political spectrum chart here in just a second. Um, on the left side of the political spectrum are liberals. Liberals tend to be the people who support new social trends like same sex marriage or the legalizing of marijuana. They want restriction on gun ownership. They tend to be more progressive. They believe that the government should be used to solve social problems, that the passing of laws will help uh, to prevent some wrong in society. They generally get referred to as the left, and in the United States, the Liberal Party is the Democratic Party in today's world. They're represented with the color blue and a donkey. Now, the part of this that I do want to explain is that the Democratic Party wasn't always the Liberal Party. When the Republican Party first came around in 1860, it was much more liberal than what the Democratic Party was at that time period. And so, as time went along, the Republican Party was the liberal party, was considered much farther left than what the Democratic Party was. And that switched all in the 1940s. But we see the development of the icon of the donkey before that. So the Democrats, who were stubborn, who didn't want change because they were conservative, got the nickname of a donkey, or got the icon of a donkey associated with them, and it has stuck since then. So again, liberal, left, blue, Democrats, all in the same thing. If you're gonna show some representation there or look at representation, you're gonna see those things all go together. In addition to that, the uh, the younger someone is, the more they tend to be liberal, as people who are younger tend to accept new social ideas and be more willing to change. They don't have a back in my day to reference, so these new things are their things. And so it's not abnormal to see younger people tend to be more liberal within society. The opposite of liberal, or the other side of the spectrum, is conservative. They're the right side of a political spectrum. They tend to favor traditional social ideas. They tend to have a religious support to them, so this traditional values, and it's generally part of the Republican Party. They get represented with the color red and the elephant, and again, that icon of the elephant is from when the Republican Party was much more liberal, was very much in power, and was seen dragging the donkeys into the 1900s. So a big difference in today's world, whereas the conservative party of today, the Republican Party, that conservative or stubbornness that got the Democrats the donkey icon would actually be more representative of the elephant in today's world. Conservatives tend to think that government doesn't solve problems, that government creates them, and that businesses or people should be the ones to solve problems. That it shouldn't be up to the government to fix problems, but that people or businesses fix problems. It's a whole different look at what's solving problems. And often conservatives and liberals disagree on all of their issues on this one basic principle of who solves problems. Is it the government stepping in to help people, or is it people should step up and do it themselves? Not everybody's one of those two. We have a moderate, and moderate tends to be in the middle. And there's moderates within both parties. There's moderate liberals, there's moderate conservatives, there's moderate Democrats and Republicans. Moderates just tend to be where they're not on the edge. Someone who's on the edge of the political spectrum would be seen as a radical. Now, the political spectrum that you see here is a pretty full political spectrum, and it ranges everywhere from communism, far left, we'll talk about that in a second, to fascism, far right. The farther you go away from the middle, the more radical someone is. The more radical someone is, the more likely they are to use violence to achieve whatever their goal is. So on a left-wing radical position, someone wants the government to create equality or fix problems, and they're willing to use violence to solve that. And then the same thing on the right side. Someone who's very extreme on the right side would see the use of violence acceptable to allow businesses or individuals to solve problems within society. And that's where fascism lies. When we talk about political parties, it's important to understand what a political party is. And a political party is just a group of voters that organize themselves over political ideas, and they vote in order to win elections. They are attempting to get people put into office. And in the United States, we have what's referred to as a two-party system. We're fairly unique in the world in that most other places in the world don't have a two-party system. But it is what it says it is. A two-party system is a government where two political parties control and win most of the elections. We haven't had a president be something other than a Democrat or Republican since 1860. That's a lot of time. Those are our two major parties, and although they've changed political ideologies, it's still the same two major parties, and it doesn't look like there's a major change coming in the future here. Other countries and a lot of other democracies in the world have a multi-party system. Multi-party systems can be anywhere from 3 to 15. Those multi-parties or major parties, however, have difficulty winning an election by themselves. In order to win an election or to get things done in government, what they have to do is form a coalition. And a coalition is where two parties agree to work together. But coalitions are much easier to break down. The Republican Party or the Democratic Party isn't going to suddenly break apart and fight against itself. And so it's pretty stable. Whoever's in power has the power. Whereas coalitions can break down very easily. You can agree to stop working with one political party. That instability that's associated with multi-party systems is seen as a negative. The positive, of course, in a multi-party system is you're more likely to be represented by a political party who represents you, who agrees with you. A lot of times in the United States, we see that people are not wholly represented by either the Republicans or Democrat, that they have a mix somewhere in there. And that's where a multi-party system kind of fills the gap. Then, in addition to a multi-party system and a two-party system, we have a one-party system. One-party systems are a little bit different. They're not really a party system at all. They're a country where a political party is only allowed at one at a time. So, for example, China, you have to be a member of the Communist Party in order to run for office. So there's not really any opinions or offerings there. There's no freedom to decide what you want. And basically the political party and the government are the same thing. So the person running the political party or the person in charge of the political party is the person in charge of the government. What the political party says is what the government's going to do. And you see one-party systems most often in dictatorships where they hold elections, but your only option in the election is to vote for the person who's in charge of the single party. That's where we see things like Russia, where they hold an election, but there's not really options there. They have a one-party system. We talked about the two sides of the political spectrum before. What we see here, fascism. Fascism is the far right. It's a government that promotes a country and or a race by trying to remove individual differences within the country. They support a business, and people who disagree with that idea are going against the country. So if a business is seen as doing something good, questioning that business is not nationalist. It's being a traitor. Examples of this: Italy during World War II, Benito Mussolini. Hitler was very famous. Nazi Germany is fascism. And the symbols of fascism here are very clear. The swastika and things like that are associated with fascism from the 1940s. Fascism also promotes a large amount of military buildup, that military is seen as patriotic or symbolic with being in line with the country. Questioning military or not supporting military as being traitorish or treasonous. And so there's some concern in the world of fascism, or people look at political parties that's a problem in today's world, that we may be seeing fascism rise again. Any questions there, sir? Yes, Benito? Oh, you wanted to hear a joke? Well, I asked my friend in North Korea how the government was going. He said he couldn't complain. No? Okay. I thought it was funny. I switched to North Korea because they're communist. Communist tries to get rid of class differences by having the government make all decisions. They own all property. And it's based on the theories of this guy, Karl Marx. Karl Marx's beliefs were that people would benefit if everyone was equal, and that the government, through forcing equality, could create a more perfect society. And we've seen some of these historically. The former Soviet Union, Vietnam, North Korea, China, Cuba, all examples of communist countries. The problem, of course, in this everyone should be equal is it requires those that have a lot of money to give it up to make those that don't have money equal. That does not happen voluntarily. And so the way you get to a communist country is you take from those that have and give to those that have not. Communism happens through a violent revolution, and all of these countries that were or are communist had some sort of violent revolution. Communism sits on the outside of the political spectrum because in order to become this, you have to have violence to get there. Now that we've talked about the setup of political parties and the political spectrum, now I want to go into propaganda. And propaganda is information that is used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or a point of view. And I've got several at the bottom of the screen. You could see the association of people with negative ideas is certainly a form of propaganda. It is often misleading or severely biased in nature, and that promotion of this point of view can be I want to say misleading, or it's used negatively a lot of times. All right, so what we're going to look at is 7 types of propaganda. The first one that I want to look at is glittering generalities. And glittering generalities is a fancy word or a good feeling statement that sounds nice but doesn't really have specifics to it. Campaign slogans will often fit into this glittering generality. President Obama's "Yes We Can" or President Trump's "Make America Great Again" both fit into this glittering generality idea that it's a phrase that people can use as a soundbite or say over and over again, but there's not really a great amount of intellect behind it. It's not meant to be a meaningful conversation starter. It's meant to be a soundbite or a repeating phrase. So first type, glittering generalities. The next type of propaganda is called bandwagon. And bandwagon is probably the easiest of them to understand, in that all bandwagon is doing is trying to say, because it's popular, you should do it. If a politician says millions of people are voting with me, that's a bandwagon appeal. If a politician and this applies not just to politics, but it applies to marketing and sales and businesses all around the world. If someone's telling you, join the millions of Americans who are doing this, they're using mass numbers to try to convince you to do something. And that's bandwagon propaganda. Pretty simple. The next one is card stacking. And card stacking is where you list a series of accomplishments, a one-sided look at factual information. So card stacking only presents one side. It's factual, but it's not necessarily truthful. It's not a full representation of what all of the truth is. So when you only present one particular set of knowledge, that card stacking can make someone say, oh, well, here's all of the good things about a product, without presenting any of the negative. Card stacking is based in the truth, but it's not the whole truth. The advertisement here that Hillary Clinton came out with when she was running against Barack Obama in 2008 in the primary elections is a great example. They had very similar tax strategies, but hers presented all of the positives of her side, and Barack Obama's, that was pointed out here, presented all of the negative to his side. So card stacking can happen positively or negatively. Next one is name calling, and name calling is what it says it is. You attack your opponent with negative words. You attempt to associate someone with a negative phrase, and Donald Trump is pretty famous at this. This is what he does. He associates people that he doesn't like with a negative phrase or association, and that negative phrase is used to attack them. Phrases like Crooked Hillary or Little Marco, Lying Ted, those phrases stick with people, and that propaganda tries to influence them in the long run. That people associate Hillary with being crooked because of that phrase, then it's a successful propaganda. The next one here is just plain folks. Just plain folks is an attempt to convince voters that they are just like you, or they attempt to use average people to support you. If a politician brings, well, I'm Joe from down the street up on stage, this is just plain folks. George W. Bush sitting on the back of a pickup truck, drinking a Coca-Cola and some work boots, looking as if he's an average American, negates the fact that his dad was the president of the United States. He could come and go out of the White House when he was in college. That's not average. He was a majority owner of the Texas Rangers. Not average. Barack Obama, multimillionaire in book sales prior to becoming president. Him sitting, eating a hamburger at a local restaurant sounds nice, but it's not really an average people situation if Barack Obama's net worth could buy the entire restaurant. But it makes people want to vote for you, and it's an attempt to convince voters that it's someone who would support you. When Donald Trump talked about, I got a small $1 million loan, uh, it was his attempt at just plain folks that he had worked hard to get from where he was to where he's at, and he's just like every other American. Endorsement is when you try to get famous people to support you, whether that's Oprah Winfrey or Kid Rock or Ted Nugent or whoever it is. You try to get famous people to support you in an attempt to then get people to say, well, if Oprah supports Barack, I like Oprah, I'll support Barack as well. Those famous people tend to sway others, and so it's an attempt to kind of rally a bandwagon through a particular person. Endorsement, if you see someone who's famous on TV speaking for a candidate, that's an endorsement strategy. Oftentimes, the president will endorse other candidates. So if President Trump goes and campaigns for a person in Alabama, that's an endorsement strategy. And the last one is transfer, and it generally is when you use a symbol that is associated with a positive thing, and you are constantly seen with that symbol in order to make you associated with that symbol. So in the United States, a lot of times politicians will do this with the American flag or an American eagle or red, white, and blue. They'll have a flag pin on their jacket so that people see them and see the flag and associate them with being representative of the United States. It's more of a visual propaganda than it is any other form. It's that people visually see you and associate you with something, and it tries to convince you that those two things are similar. And in elections, that tends to be the American flag in the background or on a shirt or however that is. Politicians will go stand with police officers or firemen in an attempt to make themselves associated with those everyday average heroes. All right, that's the notes for this week. I hope you got them all down. If you needed a pause, obviously that's not a bad thing. If you need to go back and watch or listen again, have at it. If you have questions, feel free to ask. And hope we cleared everything up for you. Hopefully the pun was a good one this week. All right.